Today on Talk to Me, I'm excited to have Ian Cron joining us. Some of you have probably recognized his name. We're in similar fields of work and passionate about helping people really heal. So, Ian, it's so good to have you here today.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm glad to be here.
I'm excited to get to know you and hear your story. Before we dive into your personal journey of healing, tell people a little bit about you and what you do, what you're up to.
Yeah, so I have a really cool portfolio life. I am an author of 5 books. I am a psychotherapist. I am an Episcopal priest. I am a trained spiritual director. I am a speaker and enneagram teacher. Yeah, which I do quite a bit of work with, and songwriter. So I have, a life that has multiple streams, and one that I just feel privileged to get up every day and live.
That's incredible. Songwriter, that tacked on at the end there is very interesting. That's quite a portfolio.
Actually, I wanted to be a songwriter before I wanted to be an author of books,
Wow, that's
and
amazing.
I do still get a chance to write, and I still get a chance to hear other artists perform my songs, and it's kind of a fun avocation on the side. It's not what I do week to week. It's just, you know, kind of a once a month I get to still get invited to be part of co-writes.
That's really neat. Okay, so in your personal life, are you a husband, a father? Tell me a little bit about what your personal life
Yeah,
looks
I've
like.
been married for 38 years.
Wow.
Uh, and My wife would say 28 of which were the happiest years of her life.
Yeah.
Um, and I have 3 kids, adult kids, and then, of course, my 2 canine muses, Pippa and Percy,
Oh.
who are the kind of the now that we're empty nesters, are kind of the center of our lives. Are these this amazing to me? I'm thinking about writing a book about dogs. It's just crazy the kinds of attachments we form with those little
Oh, I
creatures.
believe it. I believe it. I wouldn't know from personal experience, but I believe it. That's
Yeah.
for sure. Well, that's amazing. Well, I'm excited to talk to you. I know you're usually on this side of the equation as a psychotherapist, but why don't you lead the way by telling us about a time in your life where you personally were not okay?
Yeah, so I was raised in a really troubled home. My dad was a alcohol was an chronic alcoholic. He died at 60 from alcohol related disease. Never saw a day of sobriety in my lifetime that I ever saw.
Wow.
Um, and we like to say that in my family, addictions don't run, they gallop. It's like, I've got a sibling in recovery. I had 2 of my dad's sisters died from alcoholism.
Wow.
And it's just kind of everywhere, in the family. And addictions are super complicated. It's people think, oh, it's trauma, or oh, it's genetics, or oh, it's this. It's like, no, it's about 10 different things,
Yeah.
in different combinations that come into play, just a confluence of forces that can bring a person to that place.
Yeah.
And so a time when I wasn't okay would have been growing up in that home.
Right.
It was super difficult. My dad was abusive. He was unkind, um, unpredictable. There was just sort of complex trauma all the time, right? It wasn't just like, oh, here's the 4 episodes. It's like every day you just didn't know what you were getting,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well,
Yeah.
who knows what's going to happen today? And you eventually just got so used to crises,
Right.
and problems that you didn't quite know what to do without them.
Right.
Um,
When do
and
you think
then,
you recognize, like what age would you say you started recognizing that things were dysfunctional compared to friends, the outside world?
yeah, I mean, probably really early.
Yeah.
I would probably say, elementary school for sure. Because, you would just go to other friends' houses. And I mean, literally, people would come over to our house, and you got to a point. I just didn't bring people to my house because, my dad would just be drunk. I mean, you just
Yeah,
wouldn't know. And he wasn't working for a big swaths of time, so he would just be home, and you just, didn't know what your friends were going to get when they walked in the door, right?
right, right.
And so I knew early on, just beginning to compare the kinds of lives my friends were living with the kind of life I was living. And I remember being, deeply saddened by that.
Yeah. And I would imagine your nervous system kind of starts to develop its baseline of hyper alert and, scanning your environment for what's the atmosphere going to be like from 1 minute to the next. And then what? Tell me a little bit about like fast forward through that time period.
Right. So, um, at some point in my development, I think I had this revelation that, okay, I got a feral childhood here, and someone has to take responsibility for this life, and it's going to have to be me.
Yeah.
And uh, you know, I began my own journey of addiction probably beginning in, well, middle school for sure, and then high school. It accelerated. I was one of these alcoholics who I wasn't like a daily drinker. I was one of these guys who just didn't know what was going to happen when I started.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
everybody has sort of has their own sort of experience with it. I could, for example, go out in high school, have a couple of beers with friends and come home and it was a nice night and that's it. Then I would go out the next night and I'd wait and then I'd, start, in my home in Southern Connecticut and wake up in a strip mall and parking lot in Foster, Rhode Island.
Wow.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? That
It was
kind of
like a
thing.
game of roulette every time
It
you
was a
drink.
game of roulette. Yes. And I became a Christian in high school through Young Life. And
Oh,
it was
wow.
such a beautiful experience back then, because it was really the first time in my life I felt I was ever truly loved and seen by other adults.
Yeah.
And they cared so deeply for me, and really kind of saved my life in a way, right? But I was already on an addiction train, right? I didn't know that, but you know, and why wouldn't I be, given where I'd come from? I mean,
Right.
I grew up in a home where the message was, here's how you cope with life,
Right. Yeah.
you
You
know?
said starting middle school,
Oh no,
you
oh yeah, I was
you
smoking
had a
pot and
drink.
drinking, and
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
before that, I mean,
Yeah.
listen, not just even out of curiosity, um, as a kid, that was a feature of my life. So, you know, um, and I've done a I'm in my 60s. I've done a crap load of work as a therapist and of my own. And so I've made a lot of strides toward healing. I carry a great deal of compassion for my dad. Forgave my dad. That took a long time
Yeah.
to be able to reach that threshold in my life where that was possible. And I've, done the things that he couldn't do, which was face his own addictions and find healing and just a miraculous, wonderful life. Um, but there's still, I still have stuff I'm working on for sure as it relates to being an adult child of an alcoholic and being a
Right.
person in recovery. Like I can't afford to not be, and nor would I be just by virtue of temperament. I'm just somebody who's really interested in personal growth and finding the greatest, um, highest expression of who I can be and trying to become that person.
Yeah. So when you became a believer, when you became a Christian, tell me about how the journey of alcoholism intersected with the journey of faith and
Yeah.
what did it look like?
Well, I've written about it. I have a memoir called Jesus, My Father, the CIA, and Me, in which I really dive into that. And in my new book, there's a whole chapter on it too. Um, so, you know, I was one of these guys who was able to compartmentalize things, right? Like I really loved God, right? And I really loved to party. And I
Yeah.
had like two sets of friends, right? I had one set of friends that were my Christian friends. I went to club with them and, in our little campaigner Bible
Christian
study.
club.
Yeah, I had my little Christian group and they loved me and I loved them.
Yeah.
And then I had this other group of friends that were kind of like wild Irish Catholic party kids, like me. And we just tore it up, and I would always feel so guilty about and I felt this terrible disconnect between these two worlds that were running in parallel with each other. And I didn't have any leadership or mentorship in my life. And I was just trying hard to, you know, uh, I guess, please people in each of those worlds and trying to fit in as best I could in each of those worlds. But it caused a lot of interior dissonance, and like, oh, this is two different worlds and I don't know how to navigate it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's interesting when you talk about trying to fit in and even your experience with the first time you went to Young Life of just feeling like you belong, feeling like you were wanted, and now you have two worlds where you kind of want to belong, right? It's probably hard to choose one because that means you no longer belong in the other one. And for somebody who's really seeking belonging, probably letting go of one of those worlds is a much harder journey than it would might be for somebody else.
yeah, I think that's right. There's a wonderful guy who writes about addiction. His name is Johann Hari, and he says something really interesting. He says the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection.
Yeah, I love that
And
quote.
yeah, and I think he's partly right. Like I don't, I think it's a little too simplistic to say that that's all of it,
Yeah,
but the reality is connection is a big piece of what people with substance use disorder are looking for.
yeah,
And because they've had failed relationships, usually in their background, they've now formed a relationship with a substance that provides them with the friendship and predictability they were always looking for.
yeah, yeah,
And you get a social circle as a young person and I actually didn't like the people I hung around with weren't like criminals. They were actually like I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut. I mean
right,
that's
yeah,
like a very affluent. We were just like affluent, kooky kids running around partying our brains out in high school.
yeah, yeah,
So it wasn't like I was hanging out with gangsters. Was a bunch of preppies, and we were like, but we were pushing the envelope pretty hard.
yeah. I agree with you about that quote. I think it's really it's a beautiful quote. I like to say that that connection piece is connection with others, God, and self. Because once we've started making those connections, connection with self, who am
Yes.
I? What am I all about? What do I need? It starts
Yeah.
to change things.
Well, I agree 100%. So people don't, your listeners may not be familiar with the 12 steps, but when you look at them, the 12 steps of recovery, steps 1 to 3 are about establishing or deepening your relationship with God.
Yeah,
And then 4 through 7 is about establishing or deepening your relationship with yourself. 8 and 9 is about establishing or deepening your connection with others. And then 10 through 12 is just about how do you cultivate a lifestyle that is supporting health and growth in each of those domains of your life moving forward.
perfect. Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess when we put it in that context, the opposite of addiction is connection, but it's a little bit deeper than just relationship with others and mending relationship with others.
Right.
It goes
Yeah.
further into
Yeah.
relationship with self, our intricacies, our deficits, our needs, our dysfunction, our brain function, as well as the importance of our relationship with God. So how long were you functioning as an alcoholic?
Up until the age of 27.
What
Uh,
interrupted that cycle for you?
oh, God. Must we? All right. So, what interrupted it? All right. So I got married that year. And, I think my wife knew that I had a drinking problem. I don't think she realized how bad it was until after we got married.
Yeah.
And it kind of accelerated. That was the year my dad died from
Wow.
alcoholism. That was the year I took a job in a ministry, a brand new ministry, and I was beginning to fall into a pretty deep depression and complete with panic attacks, anxiety episodes. I think all related to everything just piling up. I mean, it wasn't just my drinking that was causing the depression and the anxiety. It was just also my dad dying was such a big moment because it was like suddenly all those years I had never been in counseling really, and all those years, all the grief and the sadness and the losses and my anger and all that stuff just it's almost like it was almost like driving down the road when I stopped drinking. When it's like when you're driving down a road and you've been going 100 miles an hour and then you slam on the brakes and all the crap in the back seat comes flying into the front seat, and
Yeah.
all the junk in the back seat just comes like and just hits you in the back of the head, or lands in your lap and you're like, "Oh my gosh," like I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of all this stuff. And so as a young guy that at 27, I went to see a therapist be, after one particularly nasty episode in New York City with my wife on New Year's Eve. We laughingly now refer to it as the night of the living dead. And so I won't go to the details, but you can imagine it ended in a bad blackout. And she said, you have to go back and see this therapist who I had seen previously, who had confronted me about my drinking and said to me, I won't see you as a client unless you go get help in a 12-step program. And so I, Anne Lamott has this great quote. She likes to say, getting your addictions under control is like trying to put an octopus to bed. It's like, it's just hard, right? And so I just, I just stormed out of his office the first time and said, I'm not an alcoholic. I just walked out. And then after this particular debacle in New York City, I ended up going back to that guy, and he actually himself was in recovery. So he actually could spot me coming from a mile
Hmm.
away,
Right.
and took me to my first meeting. And
Wow.
and so yeah, that was the lead up to that. And yeah, it's a long time ago now.
I know it's amazing. And your story is just so much evidence that the same alcohol that people use to numb, whatever it is, to cope, can only take you so far
Yeah.
until all of that stuff comes into the front seat. It's just the pressure
Yeah.
can only build so much before that numbing device loses its effectiveness, which is even more depressing because
Yeah.
even that isn't working anymore.
So one of my goals in life is to destigmatize addictions. Just to have people, and that's what my new book, The Fix, in part does. It's not the focus of it, but it's one of the things I hope it does. It's because, look, I didn't have a drinking problem. I had a drinking solution.
Right.
People don't have porn addictions. They have porn solutions. People don't have, eating addictions or they have eating solutions. These are external solutions to internal problems. It's only natural that people who are feeling in distress, emotionally and spiritually, would go looking for something to make it feel better.
Absolutely.
It's not a moral problem. It's not a character problem, though those can arise out of it if you go too far down the path, right?
Sure.
I'm just saying, like, when you frame it out as being like, this was my solution, not my problem. It was a symptom of a problem, but it wasn't the problem. When you finally see it that way, you go, every time I say it to people who aren't addicts or alcoholics, they go, okay, now I get it. Like,
Yeah.
oh, of course, it was your solution.
Right.
Um, and it certainly was mine.
Yeah. And for those on the outside looking in, the greater the addiction, the greater the problem, the greater the need for a solution. I mean, it's not that people are just crazy, right? There is always something driving that behavior, and it makes sense. The
Yeah.
unfortunate part is, as we know, empty things can't. fill empty people. And there's going to be a point where that solution no longer works. And that sounds like that's exactly where
Yes.
you got at 27
Well,
years old.
yeah, well, what happens is the solution you come up for the problem ends up becoming a bigger problem than the problem it was trying to solve,
Right.
right? And because the nature of addictions is they're self-escalating.
Right.
And that's the way the human brain works. And reward systems and dopamine. I won't bore everybody with the neuroscience of addiction, but it's very
You won't bore me,
comfort.
that's for sure.
Well, no, but you and I are geeks about this stuff, and your typical person doesn't want to hear about it, but um, I actually am of the opinion that everybody is an addict. I don't know anybody who's not an addict. Now, you may be on the mild versus severe end of the continuum,
Yeah.
but it's just what human beings do. It's interesting, as I'm out talking about this new book, I'll say that to people, and years ago, people wouldn't have copped to it, right? But when I tell people, I just think everyone's an addict, everybody nods their head. They don't tell me what their problem is, but they nod their head, yes. You
Yeah.
know, all of us have unhealthy, you know, how would I put this? I think,
Coping strategies,
yeah, unhealthy coping
solutions.
strategies, unhealthy
We all have unhealthy
solutions.
solutions to try to fix
Yes,
sometimes the most benign problems, even the feeling of I'm frustrated right now and running to the pantry to grab something sweet.
yes.
Solution. Is it a healthy solution? Is it an unhealthy solution? Like that's really how we have to start thinking as far as coming to terms with our personal coping skills.
Yeah, I think that addictions, when someone asked me recently what I thought an addiction was, and I said, okay, I think the best definition on the spot that I could come up with was it's an unhealthy, um, compulsive relationship with a person, a substance, or a behavior that has mood altering effects and negative consequences. Now, when you broaden the definition of addiction out like that, which of us can say that's not us?
Right.
Workaholism, perfectionism, people pleasing, uh,
Ministryaholism.
oh my gosh, codependency. I
Yeah.
mean, right, the list just goes on and on and on. It's in I think Gerald May, who I'm sure you've read, the great Christian psychiatrist, once said, he said, that to be human is to be addicted, and to be addicted and human is to stand in need of grace.
Hmm.
So it's just a part of the human condition.
Yeah. But what fascinates me is less your journey with addiction and healing from trauma and all of those things. What fascinates me more is what that looked like after you came to Jesus, because I think so many people have the false assumption that when you become a Christian, all of a sudden these things lose their grip on your life, these vices, these whatever it is. And even though the 12-step program does begin with defining that higher power, that relationship with God, that stability, it doesn't stop there. That's only the very beginning. So, what do you think it was for you that really started making a difference for you in helping you get unstuck? Was it something about the 12 steps that really was motivating for you to move forward? Was it having to just get to a really bad place? Was it genuinely integrating the power of God in your life? What do you think it was for you personally?
Yeah. So let me just tackle the first thing. Okay. So now I'm speaking as a pastor and as a therapist. Whenever, whenever people say something to me like, well, geez, you should just, the moment, well, how could you have been a Christian and doing that? I'm like, are you reading the same book I'm reading? I mean, seriously, are you reading the same Bible I'm reading? Are you living the same life that every other human is living?
Right.
Like, are you really that naive to think that suddenly you meet Jesus and what are you like living in like Disney World all of a sudden? It's like absolutely not. We are still human beings living in a broken world. And coming to faith it has nothing to do with suddenly, there's like this internal complete turnaround. We are people who struggle.
Yeah.
Okay. And if somebody can't get their head around that, I usually just move on to somebody else to talk to. I actually don't have any energy to have a conversation with somebody that is that out of touch with their own fundamental humanity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just so naive and silly, and I can't even get my head around it, you know. Um, that's when I meet a Christian who says that kind of thing, I'm like, I don't, I'm not going to be surprised about anything that comes out of their mouth next. You know, like
Right.
I don't know how you feel about it, but that's how I see
I
it.
agree with you 100%. I mean, just
Yeah,
because you're a Christian doesn't mean you're going to be healthy in any way, shape, or form because it's not about what you have done. It's about
right,
what Christ has done and then
right,
acknowledging how far you
yeah,
are from that
yeah,
standard.
yes, and becoming a Christian is only the beginning of a very long journey.
Yeah.
And anyway, I fortunately I don't run into that many people like that. You know, maybe I just don't run in those circles, but I'm fortunate that I don't have to fight that battle with anybody. Um, Now to the second part of your question, which was, remind me.
What was it for you that made the difference
Oh
in
yeah,
helping you move out of addiction?
I mean, I just got beat up.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we talk about in 12-step recovery meetings, we're always talking about the gift of desperation.
Yeah.
You know, like I was fortunate in my life, right? Because, when you have an alcohol or a substance use disorder, a moment will come when, people, someone or some group of people are going to come your way and they're going to say, you know what? This is not working for us. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
clearly not working for you.
Right.
And we think you ought to spend 30 days somewhere and try to focus on the issue. And in a way, I feel like that's actually put me at a great advantage, right? Like I feel sorry for people who have more less obvious addictions, or you know what I mean? And they have no place to go. And they can actually be desperate for their whole life
You're right.
without anybody finding out about their porn addiction, or finding
You're
out,
right.
or just being messy, having an addiction to relationships. Oh my
Right.
gosh, I've seen more damage done to people from having
Yeah. People pleasing.
people pleasing, codependency. I mean, people who have, gosh, I feel sorry for the poor guys who have, or women who have porn addictions, and they're constantly deleting their search histories and getting up at 2 in the morning so they can do that, and while their kids are asleep. I mean, oh my gosh, not for me, thank you. And now sports betting,
Yeah, I know.
or just doom scrolling on Instagram or TikTok for 9 hours a day. Like
Right.
it's that's why I always say is like, are you kidding me? You don't think you're an addict? Like, well, okay, let's just pretend for a minute you're not. You're always just one click away.
Right.
Okay. And so, for me, I was just fortunate that I sort of hit a wall. I hit it in a way that was not devastating, like
Yeah.
to other people, and was able to, and had the wherewithal to, to be able to go and away and work on what was, and to begin the journey of working on the stuff that needed to get worked on.
Did you end up in a long-term treatment,
No, just a 30-day treatment.
30 day? And
Yeah,
and
that
then
that's no, that's not long term. That's sort of minimal.
and then were you then after that just really committed to the 12-step program? Was that kind of
Yes,
your way out?
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
So is there a step in particular that means more to you personally? Like, is there a step that you think about that you're like, yeah, that one really spoke to my heart, speaks to my heart? Or does it change depending on the season?
It sort of changes. You know, Obviously the first step is critical. We admitted we were powerless over blank. Now, for me, it's substances, right? Any mood altering substance. But for you, it might be, or you meaning your audience, fill in the blank, right? So
Yeah.
we admitted we were powerless over blank, that our lives had become unmanageable. And just there is such power in admitting powerlessness. This is actually just a gospel paradox, right? When you reach a point in your life where you're like, when you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, "I am out of ammo. I I I have run out of my best old ideas
Yeah.
about how to solve this," and I'm moving toward this belief. and action of surrendering my life to God, um, because that's the only solution I have left. When you do that, this other power comes in. You can call it the Holy Spirit, you can call it whatever you like, but I'm just saying this other power comes in, and you suddenly find that someone else is doing for you what you could not do for yourself previously. And that's an amazing moment, when you realize someone's carrying me.
Hmm.
And you know, the thing about this new book that I love is I'm trying to make that available to everybody. Like, I'm really sad that for so long the only people who've had real access to the steps have been like addicts and alcoholics. But it's like, guess what? These work for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
it's really true. It's
yeah.
really true. I something about you saying someone is carrying me, and especially in light of your story and your childhood and your absent father, it just makes me emotional even thinking about you as a little boy and then you as a 27-year-old man finally feeling to the depths of your bones that someone is carrying you.
So, and let me just be clear, and this is what again is in the book, but so I had multiple well, okay, let me put it this way. So I got sober in 1987. And then, but I like to say I went to meetings, but I just audited the course. Like, like I wasn't taking it for credit yet. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was just auditing. I
You're
didn't
just
know
checking
that.
it out.
I was just checking it out. Now the good news is that the need a for drinking anymore was gone at that point, right? Like,
It
I
was
just,
causing more problems than it was a
yeah, and
solution at
I
this point.
stopped, and I
Yeah.
stopped right now.
Yeah.
But I did have a spiritual experience, and I did have a group of people that were there for me for the first, let's say, 3 years, right? And then I just stopped going to meetings, except periodically over the next couple of decades. I was just kind of like dinging in and out. Maybe once a year, twice a year, I'd show up at something, whatever. And then in 2020, I had a relapse,
Mm,
and um, I didn't talk about it for all the obvious reasons. Number one, I'm under no obligation to talk about it, right?
right. Right.
Like, just because I'm a little bit of a public figure doesn't mean I got to be public about everything. That's my right. And it's also healthy, right? Like,
I agree.
I don't want to go on Instagram and go, please pray for me. I've had
Yeah,
a
I
relapse.
agree. I agree.
I find that kind of gross and weird. Like, go do your work. And then if the time comes and you want to talk about it, do it then, right?
Right.
And then I got 4+ years into a program. I'm like, I've been so blessed by this because now I'm taking it for credit. Um, and I just wanted to, and then I felt like I need to share what I've learned, because I think these steps could help everybody. So it's like I didn't want to write a memoir about my life. I've done that before. What I wanted to do was write about the steps, and my own life just became a good excuse for showing how they work.
Yeah.
And they have really buoyed me and given me a design for living that is really, and it's very gospel centered. So any of your folks listening right now who are saying, "Oh, I don't want to do the 12 steps because it's not the gospel." I'm like, "Really? Have you read them?"
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. It
they
is
are
so
the,
in line with
yes.
God's truth.
Oh my gosh. They were derived from a Christian organization called the Oxford Group in the 1930s. That's where the 12 steps come from.
And I think you're right in saying if we all could just see our own negative solutions. I'm curious, between sobriety the first time
Hmm.
and relapse, what
Yes.
was your solution then? What do
Oh,
you think?
what a good question. Ooh, that's got all kinds of meat on it, right? What was my solution? Um, I'd say it was success,
Yeah.
being recognized and appreciated. One of my favorite drugs was the approval of others. Um, you know, and uh, yeah, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
was what carried me. And but also, I was doing lots of good stuff. And human beings are just such bags of contradictions, like um there was many I had lots of really, really wonderful, wonderful years in there. I wrote great songs, award-winning songs. I sold well over 1 million books. I was whatever. I mean, I had the stuff, right? And a lot of that was just sort of holding me up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I went to
Yeah.
there and I did work through a lot of stuff in those years. It's not like, I say all to say, that was probably my solution in those years.
Yeah. It's just a way to get us all thinking about our own solutions and
Hmm.
when do they start to get misaligned with the person and nature of Jesus Christ. Because when it starts to shift, even these healthy things, these good things, success, books, preaching, ministry, if we're not careful, an unhealthy solution becomes an unhealthy solution, which leads to more problems.
Yeah. And we should never underestimate the human capacity for self-deception.
Yeah,
And whether and you know what? The people who are most susceptible to self-deception are people like you and me,
I know. Yeah, it's so true.
because we know stuff. And then because we know stuff, we think we're immune.
Right.
And then, you know what I mean? And then we think,
Hmm.
oh, well, I know better. And it's like, okay, well, now you're really vulnerable. If
Yeah.
you think you know better and that you found a hack to get around just the basic problems of what it means to be human, then we have failed. And
It's so funny you say that. The more that I have gotten into this world, as far as education, expertise, influence, the more I tell my husband, I'm like, I need a daily heart check. I need an hourly heart check
yeah,
because you just become susceptible, the less careful you are, the more susceptible you
yeah.
become.
I was in treatment and this is a funny story. And by the way, the book is kind of funny. I mean, I know I'm not, we're talking about me, but that is such the forefront of my life right now. So it just doesn't, but it's actually kind of humorous in many parts, right? It's deathly serious, but it still has that
You
Irish
seem like a
Catholic
funny
humor.
guy.
Well,
I could
anyway,
see it.
I was in a meeting when I was in treatment. I was in a group, right? And it was early on, and I said, and I was kind of like just being a bit of a braggart or something. I mean, and I just, mentioned all these wonderful things I had done. I've written books and I've spoken to all these people and I've done this and that and the next thing. And this guy across the room from me in this little circle looks at me and goes, "Yep, and here you are."
Ain't that the truth?
And that's how I think, to your point, right? It's like, the moment you think you've got it all buttoned up, man, with your
Right.
package of goods, you are just self-deceived. And I look back on that moment, and it was I was embarrassed in the moment, but I can look back and go, well, he was right. And boy, is that
Yeah,
funny, really, in a weird
it
way.
is so good. Well, I'm just so grateful for your story, and I can tell that this is a journey for you that doesn't end, as it should be for all of us. The journey of recovery, the process of healing and sanctification is an invitation to continue journeying with the Lord. And as He is revealing the next layer of healing for you and for me, it's an invitation. And, for those who are listening, and sometimes we feel shame when God reveals the next thing, but really we should feel honored that He's inviting us deeper,
Yeah.
you know?
So so I really love the word invitation, so I'm glad you used it. I feel like anyone who's listening who's got an addiction problem, okay, let me just say one thing. The shame and the guilt that you feel, or whatever you feel, when you realize, looking back, and maybe you can only do this looking in the rearview mirror, there's this moment when you realize, or at least I have, that my journey with addiction, and it's got two chapters. Um, I really see it in both instances as a an invitation from God to a deeper level of intimacy with him than I previously knew existed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you realize, oh, wait a minute, what if my addiction or my solution, okay,
Yep.
if we want to put it that way, what if I stop beating myself up for it and realize and stop for a moment and realized, oh, wait a minute, maybe this is God summoning me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to, yes, I am going to have to address the behavior. And that might mean going to a support group, might mean going to therapy, might, whatever it is that you got to do. That's great. But maybe if I understood it as God saying, you are looking for me in places where I am not.
Yeah.
You're drinking from the wrong well. So I
Yeah.
oftentimes tell people about addiction, right? It's like whenever you go looking outside of yourself to fix something inside of yourself, that's like going to the hardware store to buy bread.
Yeah.
It's like you're shopping in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And guess what? That's what humans do. It's like, don't feel bad. It's just what humans do, right? Like you're not special. You just did something lots of humans do, right? And and maybe what you're going to discover is that your so-called worst defeat is actually your greatest triumph. That
Yeah.
it, in theology they call that a eucatastrophe, a good catastrophe. Your addiction is a good catastrophe if you respond to it correctly, right?
Right.
It will become a good catastrophe where you know, it's a seeming failure. But when you get on the other side of it, you realize that you will actually begin one day to wake up and go to a meeting if that's your thing and say, I'm a grateful recovering blank.
Yeah.
And it will be a source of great blessing.
I believe that with all of my heart. And it's incredible to see it play out in your life and in the lives of so many others. An invitation to deeper healing. So thank you so much, Ian, for sharing your story and your journey, and allowing us to be a part of it. Tell us a little bit about the fix and where people can grab a copy and how they can connect with you.
Yeah, so it is the fix, how the 12 steps offer a surprising path of transformation for the well adjusted, the down and out, and everyone in between. And as I mentioned, it's an exploration of the 12 steps, not just for people who are wrestling with addictions, but for everybody. So this
Yeah,
book is for everybody, right? It's let's because I would love to get rid of this mindset of, oh, there are those people and us. There are those
right.
people, meaning the addicts and alcoholics, and us. It's like, no, there's only us. You
Yeah,
know, there's
yeah.
only us people. Stop, coming up with labels and tribes for everybody, right? Um, and it drops on January 28th. I don't know when this show drops, but if it's after January 28th, you can just jump on Amazon and grab it or at any of your favorite booksellers. And my socials are at Ian Morgan Cron, so people can keep up with all the stuff that I'm doing there.
Well, thank you, Ian. It was so great to get to know you and hear your story and appreciate you sharing your time with me today.
Thanks, Deborah.